Hello again. Thank you very much for joining me here on Movie Ninja. Tonight I'm going to be talking about the Amazon Prime original action superhero film, The Samaritan. The Samaritan takes place in a fictional city in the United States called Granite City. And in Granite City, two names are the stuff of legend. And that is the heroic Samaritan and the hard-edged vigilante Nemesis. Now, with this film, you have certain expectations going into this, particularly because the main star of it is Sylvester Stallone. Most audiences are particularly familiar with him from his work in the Rocky Balboa series, the Rambo series, the Expendables, things like that. So you come into this with certain expectations, especially as it is marketed as a superhero film. It is not. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, as mentioned, these two figures were titanic in Granite City at one time, but mostly for their rivalry. Both had a different approach to managing the crime of Granite City. Samaritan was more benevolent, at least that's his reputation. Nemesis was much more, I'll put someone to the curb if I feel that's necessary. Unfortunately, their inability to disagree in a civil manner, and yes, I'm being a little bit sarcastic with that, encouraged a type of sibling rivalry that unfortunately escalated into a battle to the death. Now, this is at the very front end of the movie, so you're not even 5 minutes into it before you get any of this information. But after this clash of titans, well, both disappear. What happens then? Well, unfortunately, crime and the general infrastructure of Granite City do not improve over time. And, well, just things go from bad to worse, unfortunately. So you have this boy who lives in this sort of like, for Granite City, run-of-the-mill neighborhood, unfortunately. He is looking for someone to fix the problems that engulf his world. As most children do. But he looks towards sort of like mystery/conspiracy theories that surround Samaritan and Nemesis with regards to, like, hey, maybe Samaritan lived. Maybe Samaritan lived after he defeated Nemesis, and if he comes back, maybe he can fix all the problems. What if? So he has this unfortunate problem with kind of seeing Samaritan in almost every single one of his neighbors. Well, I mean, eventually, if you keep just trying hard enough, I guess you'll hit the bullseye, and you'll hit the target eventually. So he does manage to come up with a probable Samaritan in Joe the Garbage Man. Joe the Garbage Man is very reclusive. He's kind of misanthropic. He kind of doesn't like people. He just likes to keep to himself. Clock in, clock out. He has a hobby of fixing discarded items, such as appliances, radios, just what have you. So, but after Joe rescues this boy from, some neighborhood bullies, and when I say neighborhood bullies, I mean wannabe gangsters. These are not just like kids that are after another kid for his lunch money. These are wannabe gangsters that are trying to kill him. Well, Joe comes to his rescue, and hey, it becomes rather obvious. He's Samaritan. He's okay. So this kid, he begins kind of a reluctant on Joe's behalf, a reluctant, begrudging sort of like friendship, because he's not ready to come full out and say, yeah, I'm Samaritan. There we go. I mean, this was who I was in another life, but I've since retired since then. But Granite City still needs Samaritan. And Joe relents and he says, yeah, I could see that, but there's a reason. There's a number of good reasons that I left the business after my last fight, my final fight with my brother. And so what happens is, for this film, you actually get what I believe can be best described as an extended character study, This kid has questions for Joe. It's like, hey, what were some of your best adventures? How many people could you beat up at a single time? And of course, there's the big one, why? Why did you stop being a superhero after you defeated Nemesis? And reluctantly, Joe does answer a number of these questions. But he also wants to impress upon this kid that the world isn't exclusively divided in good and evil. And there are a number of very valid reasons why, okay, the last time I saw my brother, we were fighting to the death. And then I retired. Joe approaches his tenure as a superhuman with a number of regrets. And I actually find this very, very refreshing. So, what if, we lived in a world with superheroes, and what if, some of them, left the superhero business prematurely, there has to be a reason for that. There has to be a reason, out of all of the battles, out of all of the struggles, out of facing all of these enormous societal issues, or maybe just one battle too many. As the movie goes on, you want to give Joe the benefit of the doubt and say, he was right to leave the responsibilities of his past behind. And that I find extremely intriguing. Now, for the average audience member who is sort of become accustomed to the saturation of superhero media that we have nowadays, this will probably not land the way that you think it will, especially with the way that it was marketed. Because this was marketed as a typical Sylvester Stallone action film. Does it have the punch of a regular Sylvester Stallone action film? Not at all. But in many ways, it's actually a breath of fresh air. It's actually very, very refreshing to see something like this as just a movie to understand why a superhero would retire from being a superhero, Something that comes with so much glory, so much fame, so much adoration from the public. What could the reason possibly be? And this movie does a very good job of creating a kind of compelling sort of, out to pasture superhero figure in Joe. And Joe, just putting this out there to make it seem like I'm not being dismissive of the action content entirely, Joe does have to come to blows eventually with an up-and-coming supervillain, or at least an up-and-coming criminal overlord. It's Cyrus. Cyrus has an incredible fandom, an incredible affinity for Nemesis. And it's more... Before I go on, before I ruin anything, Cyrus feels that the loss of Nemesis was a betrayal to Granite City in some ways. That was my interpretation of it. The script, not built up enough to the point where Cyrus just says, hey, my admiration for, Nemesis is because of blank, the X, fill in the blank. So there are parts of the screenplay that unfortunately were a bit vague. In some places, that vagueness actually does work. But in others, especially for the motivation of our main antagonist, you're kind of going to have to draw your own conclusions. The film overall, I think, mostly works. The climax was good, but didn't quite stick the landing. And I think those who have watched the film and those that understand what I'm talking about, because I'm not giving specific details away, it's like, okay. It has its strength, but I think it would have been better managed by a skilled independent film director or directors. The way that it comes off, it is still very intriguing. You want to keep watching because you want the answers behind Joe's life and behind his destructive rivalry with Nemesis. You want this. And so you will keep watching. That being said, the film is just a little bit over 2 hours long, and pacing is also an issue. So we're a bit slim on the action. Pacing, you do feel the length of the movie, and the climax, it could have been better, in my opinion. But all this being said, I still think that it's refreshing to have a superhero movie that is just focused on the character. And this is someone who knows my best days are behind me. My glory is all behind me. And what do I have to show for it? He has a number of sizable regrets. And I actually find that very intriguing. Like, instead of just having someone who punches away all of the problems, you actually have someone who has a pretty decent field of depth to their character. So, if not for some of the weaknesses of this, I would be a bit more generous, but I'm going to give this film a solid 6 out of 10. And I hope, if people know a little bit about this film as they go into it, I hope that they'll be able to enjoy it. It's not Marvel, it's not DC. It's its own thing. And it's not bad. So, I will give it a very solid, decent, working 6 out of 10. What do you guys think? Have you seen The Samaritan? What are your opinions? Let me know in the comments section down below. Thank you very much for joining me here on Movie Ninja, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.